been pregnant for way too long. I tell the DJ turn it off.
Meghan and Harry reveal how they tried to speed up the arrival of their daughter, Lilibet. And we'll take a first look at tomorrow's front pages in our press preview from 10:30 right through to midnight. Good evening. President Trump says Vladimir Putin told him very strongly tonight that Moscow is planning a response to a series of Ukrainian attacks on Russia. The two leaders spoke on the phone for more than an hour and discussed Ukraine's drone strikes on Russian air bases at the weekend, which Kyiv claims destroyed or damaged 41 Russian aircraft, including strategic bombers. The scale of Russia's planned response to the attacks is not yet clear, though Russia's Deputy Foreign Minister has told Sky News all options are on the table. He's been speaking to Sky's Ivor Bennett, who has this report from Moscow.
It was an attack that left 7 dead and dozens injured. A bridge in Russia's Bryansk region blown up as a passenger train passed underneath. Ukraine hasn't commented on it, but Moscow says Kyiv's to blame. And now, 4 days later, Vladimir Putin's given his first response.
The Kyiv leadership has moved on to organising terrorist acts, and at the same time they're asking to suspend hostilities for 30 or even 60 days, asking for a meeting at the highest level. But how can any such meetings be conducted in such circumstances? What should we talk about? How can we negotiate with those who rely on terror?
It's exactly what Ukraine said of Russia for the past 3 years, but no mention of that. And still no mention of Kyiv's audacious drone attack on Russia's long-range bombers, something Moscow's been keen to play down. But the Kremlin leader did discuss it with Donald Trump in a surprise phone call the American president announced on social media. We discussed the attack on Russia's docked airplanes by Ukraine and also various other attacks that have been taking place by both sides. It was a good conversation, but not a conversation that'll lead to immediate peace. President Putin did say, and very strongly, that he will have to respond to the recent attack on the airfields. Moscow said the call focused on Ukrainian attacks on Russian civilians. It's barely a week since Donald Trump called Vladimir Putin crazy for a series of Russian attacks on Ukraine. But now the attacks have been coming in the opposite direction. It feels like the Kremlin is trying to turn the tables on Kyiv and cast itself as the victim. The aim, I think, is to make Donald Trump believe that Russia has the right to respond. And as for how Russia might respond, there was this ominous warning.
We demand that both London and Washington react in a manner that will stop this cycle of escalation.
So how will Russia respond? Are all options on the table, or can you rule out a nuclear response?
This is a question to our military people and our Supreme Commander. I am not in a position to speculate. All options are on the table, that's right.
There aren't many options on the negotiating table, though. After Monday's peace talks, still no plans for any more, with the two sides seemingly further apart than ever. Ivor Bennett, Sky News, Moscow.
Let's go live to Washington and Sky's David Blevins, who's there for us. And David, Donald Trump not exactly positive about any hopes of a ceasefire after this call with Vladimir Putin.
That's right, Gillian. This post ended an unusual silence from the President of the United States. These were his first comments on that audacious Ukrainian drone attack on Russian air bases. He said that the Russian president had made it very clear he would have to respond, but there was no suggestion that Donald Trump had urged Vladimir Putin not to do so. They had a very lengthy conversation lasting 1 hour and 15 minutes, and he described it as a very good conversation, but also conceded that it wasn't going to lead to an immediate peace. Now, think back to January when Donald Trump returned to the White House. He seemed very confident that he was going to end this war quickly. He talked a lot about his very good relationship with Vladimir Putin. But here we are now today, and we seem no closer to an end to that war. And then just last month, following those Russian attacks on Ukraine, he described Putin as absolutely crazy and gave him just 2 weeks to make progress. I suppose the fact that the two leaders are speaking again might be deemed progress, but the continuing threat of tit-for-tat violence between Russia and Ukraine is very far from that.
Indeed. David, thank you. Here, the Old Bailey has heard that an arson attack in East London was orchestrated by the Russian Wagner paramilitary group. The fire in March of last year targeted a business supplying Starlink satellite equipment to Ukraine. Let's bring in our correspondent Sadia Chowdhury. And Sadia, what have you heard in court today?
So the court proceedings started in the trial of 6 men. So you have the 6 men, 2 of them facing charges of failure to disclose information about a terrorist act, and 4 of them facing charges of aggravated arson. All 6 deny the charges against them. Now, at the top of their, you could say, leadership command, chain of command, are 2 other men, 2 separate men who are not on trial and have already pleaded guilty to offences. Jake Reeves, who is 23 years old, and Dylan Earl, who is 20. And the prosecution say that by pleading guilty, Dylan Earl has accepted the claim that he was working for a foreign power, and Jake Reeves that he was receiving cash from the Wagner Group, which the prosecution described as a terrorist organisation and private military contractor intimately connected to the Russian state. And we heard in court how Dylan Earl had been chatting to users on the social media app Telegram, the users called Privet Bot and Lucky Strike, and that as well as the fire that the 2, Jake Reeves and Dylan Earl, had discussed further plots on 2 businesses in Mayfair, a restaurant and a wine shop, and also a plot to kidnap their owner, the business owner. And they discussed payment. A 50k payment was discussed, £50,000 payment was discussed. And Dylan Earl told Jake Reeves that the money was coming from Russia and that the target should be captured so he could be exiled to Russia to face prison.
Sadia, thank you for that update. The Chancellor has confirmed that the government's U-turn on the winter fuel allowance means more pensioners will receive payments this year. But finding the cash for it will add to the pressure on Rachel Reeves as she prepares to set out the budgets for government departments in next week's spending review. Our political editor, Beth Rigby, was in Rochdale for the Chancellors Speech and sent this report.
The Chancellor preparing for her moment, no doubt feeling the pressure as she puts the finishing touches to a spending review that Labour hopes will reset its relationship with voters losing the faith.
I will set out a spending review targeted squarely on the renewal of Britain, focused on the priorities of working people.
The Chancellor at a bus depot in Rochdale to announce £15 billion for trams, trains and buses across the Midlands and the North, all in a bid to tell a better economic story for Britain and take reform head on.
When Liz Truss and the Conservatives trashed market confidence in our British economy, it was working people who paid the price. Be in no doubt, Nigel Farage and Reform are itching to repeat that exact same experiment.
But Reform not her only fight. Reeves battling with her own side too, as Labour MPs press the Chancellor to raise taxes or relax her borrowing rules rather than cut government spending.
Strong and transparent fiscal rules are an indispensable safeguard for working people, and that is why my rules are non-negotiable.
But something her MPs did want to hear, confirmation that more pensioners will qualify for winter fuel payments this year.
People should be in no doubt that the means test will increase and people will get, more people will get winter fuel payment this winter.
Chancellor, in the past 2 weeks, voters have heard about big increases in defence spending, a reversal of cuts to winter fuel allowance, potentially lifting the 2-child benefit cap, and they wonder how you're going to pay for all of these additional commitments. Can you be honest with the public that you cannot rearm and do all the rest on welfare with either really deep cuts elsewhere or future tax rises?
Well, I'm not going to write another 4 years' worth of budgets before we've got even through the first year of this government. But we made tax changes in the autumn last year worth £40 billion so that we could provide that injection of cash into our public services. But the most important thing that we can do to have money for public services is to grow the economy.
Listening to all of this, the Mayor of Greater Manchester, Andy Burnham, I spoke to him earlier, and he, like Angela Rayner, backs targeted tax increases.
I'd come up with something that can be controversial, but council tax has not been revalued since the early 90s. In fact, I would look further at land taxation and land taxation reform.
The Conservatives clear the Chancellor's last round of tax hikes already hurt him.
A government that has come in, loaded up taxes on businesses, depressed growth, borrowed and taxed and spent like it's the 1970s all over again, stoking inflation, keeping interest rates higher for longer. If you adopt that approach, you end up in a really difficult position.
The Chancellor came here to Rochdale to try and sell a story to voters across the Red Wall that this Labour government will invest in their communities. And next week, the Chancellor's going to announce over £100 billion in capital spending, investing in transport networks, in new homes, in new power stations. But if that's the sell, here's the sting. Day-to-day spending is going to be squeezed, be it on the police or on schools or local councils. There are going to be spending cuts, and that is going to be politically fraught, contested and unpopular. The Chancellor wants to frame next week as the moment Labour begins to rewire the economy for working people. But with more spending cuts on the way, it's proving difficult for Labour to argue things are getting better. Beth Rigby, Sky News, Rochdale.
Let's go live to Westminster and our political correspondent there, Rob Powell. And Rob, the Chancellor talking tough there, but she does have some very difficult choices ahead of her, doesn't she?
Yes, and two of the biggest ones that we've been talking a lot about this week are welfare and warfare. On the first, confirmation today that some people will get their winter fuel allowance back this winter. We don't exactly know who that'll be yet, and that's a piece of information that will determine quite how expensive funding this U-turn turns out to be. On the second, the gauntlet laid down on defence spending by the US to the UK today. We had Donald Trump's ambassador to NATO calling for the UK and other NATO countries to spend 5% on defence and to spend it now. Now, that aligns with what we were reporting yesterday about the UK being forced to spend more on defence at a NATO summit due later this month. What it doesn't align with, though, is the UK's current plans. And I think that was on show when John Healey, the Defence Secretary, was asked about that 5% demand at a press conference today and simply didn't really answer the question. Now, his German counterpart, the Defence Minister there, he was more blunt, more honest maybe, when he said at the same press conference that spending that amount immediately was simply unrealistic. Now, he was speaking in a German context, but you could equally, when you look at the public finances, apply that to the UK as well. Spending is tight, the public finances are tight, and I think that is why many people are coming to the conclusion that come the budget in the autumn, the only way for the government to make ends meet may be through tax rises. Now, you heard some suggestions from Andy Burnham, the Manchester mayor there, of where they could land. Today, the Chancellor ruled out putting up national insurance income tax or VAT, saying that manifesto promise still stood. That leaves other options, though, and when she was asked about, say, income tax thresholds, she didn't answer on that. What she did say, though, was that the budget this year would be of a different scale to the one last year. There wouldn't be a repeat of the size of the tax-raising budget from last year. Now, that may be right, but the problem the Chancellor is facing is fundamentally the same one. Too many demands and not enough cash.
Rob, thank you. Well, adding to the pressure on the Chancellor is continuing uncertainty about the effects on the UK of Donald Trump's trade tariffs. The US President says the UK will be exempt from a 50% tax on steel and aluminium imports. But he also signalled that the higher rate could kick in next month if a tariff deal agreed with the British government is not implemented in time. Our economics and data editor, Ed Conway, has more.
It's worth just giving you an update on where we are with this big story, and it certainly is big. When you look at this chart, you really get a sense of that. It's a historic chart of the level of US tariffs on all goods going back to the 19th century, late 19th century, and where we are right now is the highest level of tariffs since 1939. They are in place right now. And if you look at other specific items, so that's across all goods, but look at specific things like, for instance, steel and aluminium, and golly, I mean, look at this chart, OK? So this is showing you specifically steel and aluminium. It was 25%. That was already historic highs. but now it's going up to 50%, OK? And the UK could get out of that. So we've got a stay of execution. We don't have to pay the 50% for the time being, provided we can get our trade deal with America agreed in time by July the 9th. But that's not simple. And it's not simple because it takes time between agreeing a trade deal and actually implementing it. And if you look back at the history of various different trade deals in the UK, the bars are just showing you how long it's taken to actually get them into black and white. UK accession to the CPTPP, that's kind of a trade partnership, 625 days. Deal with Australia, 714 days. Last time we were trying to reverse trade tariffs, 71 days. And right now, we're on 28 days. So we've done 28 days. We have up until the 9th of July, which is 63 days, to get this done in time, or else who knows what's going to happen. And there's a lot of stuff that needs to be agreed. So if you go into the small print, OK, so this is the small print as we have it so far. There's not much of it. But what we do know is, for instance, OK, there's cars, looks relatively simple, but actually there's still some big question marks over who's actually going to get the quotas. Is it first come, first serve, for instance? Pharmaceuticals, lots of question marks there. And when it comes to steel and aluminium, well, for instance, one of the things that the US is very, very particular about is they want any steel imports into the US that are going to be excluded from those tariffs to be only melted and poured in the UK. Now, why does that matter? It matters because if you look at the UK and where we make steel, OK, so two big places, for instance, Port Talbot and Scunthorpe. You've got blast furnaces there, or at least you did until recently in Port Talbot. They've shut down the blast furnaces there, so they're not actually melting steel in Port Talbot. Instead, they're importing lots of it from the Netherlands and quite a lot of it from India as well. So that they need an exception. And are they going to get the exception? No one knows, but it takes time. Same thing across in Scunthorpe. So they do have blast furnaces. They are melting steel there in Scunthorpe, but British Steel, it's actually technically still owned by the Chinese, by Jingye, even though it has been kind of nationalised by the government. So you see the issue. All of these complexities, meaning it's taking longer and longer to come up with this final agreement, and that raises the question of whether we are going to have to pay those higher tariffs.
In the last hour, the United States has vetoed a UN Security Council resolution calling for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza. The US ambassador to the UN, Dorothy Shea, said America's decision should come as no surprise.
Any product that undermines our close ally Israel's security is a non-starter. This resolution would undermine diplomatic efforts to reach a ceasefire that reflects the realities on the ground and emboldens Hamas. This resolution also draws false equivalence between Israel and Hamas, which is both wrong and dangerous.
Well, earlier, the UK government strongly criticised Israel for the way aid is being distributed in Gaza. The Foreign Office Minister, Hamish Faulner, described Israel's methods as inhumane after dozens of Palestinians were killed in recent days while attempting to get humanitarian supplies. He said the UK was now considering taking further action against Israel.
Israel's newly introduced measures for aid delivery are inhumane, foster desperation, and endanger civilians. Israel's unjustified block on aid into Gaza needs to end. It is inhumane. Israel must immediately allow the United Nations and aid partners to safely deliver all types of aid at scale to save lives, reduce suffering, and maintain dignity. It must ensure food and other critical supplies can reach people safely where they are across the whole of the Gaza Strip.
The Israeli Foreign Ministry has told Sky News that changes to the way aid is being distributed are for the benefit of the people of Gaza.
They were very clear that today the distribution points will be closed because they need to do logistical work in order to improve their operation. But I want us to pause about the rationality. Instead of channeling aid through vehicles and organization and routes that end up in the hands of Hamas, we're trying to do something different, something for the benefit of the people of Gaza.
Hospital bosses have told Sky News that mental health cases at A&Es across England have reached crisis level. A growing number of patients rely on emergency departments for support, but there simply aren't enough staff or beds to cope with the demand. Our health correspondent, Ashish Joshi, has this special report from King George Hospital in East London, a warning that it contains references to self-harm.
Please, please.
This is body cam footage worn by hospital security staff. It shows patients in a mental health crisis inside a busy A&E. They require the most urgent care, but are now facing some of the longest waits on record. It's Wednesday morning, and the A&E team at King George's Hospital in Ilford are already caring for 5 mental health patients on top of their usual acute workload. One patient wants to leave and is becoming increasingly distressed. She's already been waiting 12 hours. The woman is being held under the Lack of Capacity Act and won't be allowed to leave. Nearby, Ajay Kumar and his wife are waiting patiently by their son's bedside. He's experienced psychotic episodes since starting university in 2018, and his father says he can become unpredictable and violent.
They sanctioned him. He should be insecure now, yes? He shouldn't go out in the public. Last night, he ran away at night.
From hospital?
Yes, and he walked all the way home. Took him 4.5 hours to come home.
So now you and your wife will have to sit by his bedside until he's found a mental health bed, and that could take days.
Could be days, I don't know how many. They're not telling us anything.
The King George is having to construct makeshift mental health spaces to try and tackle the issue.
So we've had 2 rooms kind of purpose-built. They're under 24-hour CCTV surveillance.
Joe is ex-military. He now works as part of the security team.
I've lost count the amount of time that I've been assaulted. We have patients here for over a week, unsectioned, and they cannot find a bed.
They see up to 200 patients a day through this emergency department. Now, on top of that, they'll see between 15 to 20 mental health patients as well.
I'm seeing increasing numbers of complaints from other patients and their families about the environment they've had to wait in. And they're not blaming the mental health patients for being here, but what they're saying is being in a really busy accident emergency with ambulances, with somebody who's highly distressed, and you're sat there with an elderly relative or a sick child or whatever. It's hard for everyone.
The Department for Health and Social Care told Sky News it's transforming mental health services through its plan for change, including a £26 million investment in services. And NHS England says it's working with local authorities to address the problem and making sure emergency departments now have a psychiatric liaison team available 24/7. Ashish Joshi, Sky News at the King George's Hospital in Ilford.
And if you've been affected by that report in any way, you can contact the Samaritans at any time on 116 123 or email joe@samaritans.org. The new head of the Criminal Cases Review Commission, Dame Vera Baird, has told Sky News she wants to win back public trust following a series of high-profile miscarriages of justice. The commission was heavily criticised in the wake of Andrew Malkinson case after he spent 17 years in prison for a crime he did not commit, and a damning review found it had repeatedly failed to act on opportunities to help clear his name. Dame Vera says there are a number of recurring issues that must be addressed.
In your view, how bad are things?
I think it's in a worrying position. There have been, in the last 10 years, 4 separate inquiries into it. They all find the same things, that they don't communicate with applicants, they are reluctant to challenge the Court of Appeal, they look for reasons not to refer rather than to refer, and are quite often, incompetent.
At least 11 people have been killed and dozens of others injured in a stampede outside a cricket stadium in southern India. The crowd surged as thousands of people gathered in the city of Bengaluru to celebrate their team's first Indian Premier League title win. A body has been found in the search for Scottish man Greg Monks, who went missing during a stag party in Portugal last month. In a statement, his family said the 38-year-old was an amazing boy who everyone thought highly of and thanked those who tried to help find him. One of the officers involved in the latest search for Maddie Macan has told Sky News that so far not a trace has been found. They've given themselves until Friday to scour scrubland and abandoned buildings in southern Portugal, 18 years after the then 3-year-old disappeared while on holiday with her family in Praia de Luz. Sky's Dan Whitehead has this report from the search area.
Shifting rubble, cutting through dense shrubland, the search is well underway. They are looking for any clues that lead to Maddie Macan's whereabouts.
Well, this is one of 3 of the derelict farm buildings which we've seen police searching on day 2. They've been emptying buckets of rubble from inside the buildings, and they've been using chainsaws in dense undergrowth as well.
With the rubble cleared, there are reports ground-penetrating radar will scan these floors. But 18 years on from when she went missing, police won't comment on just what intelligence has brought them back.
They use identification work if any bone fragment appears, and this is done in the laboratory unit. Using equipment in the field, it is possible to detect whether there are bone fragments present in the geographical areas that are the target of the search.
When the 3-year-old went missing in 2007, the world's media descended on the village of Praia de Luz. Nearly 2 decades on, the impact in the resort can still be felt. Just metres from the holiday apartment where Maddie was sleeping. Taryn from the UK runs a beauty spa.
I think people are really upset about it because it just keeps dragging down Praia de Luz. It's all people think of when they, hear of Praia de Luz where Maddie went missing. All I've ever heard about is how badly everyone was affected, and it took a long, long time to recover. So this keeps dragging it all up again.
The search here is due to finish on Friday. One officer told me off camera that so far nothing has been found. There are 2 days left to uncover something somewhere that might just lead to Madeline. Dan Whitehead, Sky News in Nagosh, Portugal.
The Duchess of Sussex has shared a video of her and Prince Harry dancing just before she gave birth to Lilibet as they celebrate their daughter's 4th birthday.
Been pregnant for way too long. I tell the DJ turn it off.
If she a baby mama,
go ahead.
She gon' do that baby mama.
Work.
She gon' put it on you.
Well, Meghan says Lilibet was past her due date, so the couple took to dancing in a bid to encourage the baby along. She added, when spicy food, all that walking and acupuncture didn't work, there was only one thing left to do. Well, that was a Sky News at 10. Coming up, we'll take a first look at tomorrow's newspapers in the press preview. Tonight, we're joined by the columnist and broadcaster Steve Richards and the former First Minister of Northern Ireland, Baroness Foster. Amongst the stories we'll be discussing, this on the front of The Guardian. Its headline, chaos fears over return of winter fuel payments. We'll be right back. Do stay with us.